Hello and welcome to the Creative Network. This is the engine room. I'm in the engine room, which is home to Somerset Film in Bridgewater. And every month we run a conversation with a Somerset-based artist. And this might be an artist working in painting, sculpture, a poet, a dancer, a choreographer. But usually the conversation comes around to how that artist is exploring digital media, because we run this project here at Somerset Film as part of Ignite Somerset, which is our Arts Council funded project, which is all about working with Somerset-based artists to explore the creative potential of digital technology. So today we're going to be chatting to an artist called Tina Salvidge. I first met Tina. In fact, we've never actually physically met. It's one of those things that happens nowadays, isn't it? Whereby you think you know somebody really well, but you've actually only ever met them via the screen. Probably last month, we had a Ignite Somerset artist surgery session. So that's a couple of hours online where you can get some tech support, some digital creative tech support. And those sessions might be on anything from understanding how to make a podcast, to blogging, to video editing, to working in installation art. And I met Tina on one of these sessions, and I asked her at the end, would you like to do next month's Creative Network? And she agreed, which is fantastic. So Tina, as I understand it, works in the moving image. And it's an interesting one because here at Somerset Film, we're often working with filmmakers who are interested in, narrative-based films with a beginning, middle, and end. They're interested in showcasing their films in cinemas and in that kind of conventional environment. But increasingly, we're working with artists who are also choosing to explore the moving image and whose work is perhaps not destined for a cinema, but more an art gallery. Anyway, I've talked quite a lot already, so I'm going to move myself to the corner, and we should see Tina any moment now. Here she is. Hello, Tina. Now let's just get this set up so that we've got you looking at them, filling the screen a little bit more. Okay. So, Tina, just to start with, just want to do a little brief introduction to yourself. What we're going to do, incidentally, is show 5 very short moving image sequences, and Tina will sort of talk about those sequences and give them some context. But to start with, do you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, well, I describe myself as a fine art documentarian, which is a slightly different term to, as you're saying, a lot of the work that you may be doing at Somerset Film. I've recently completed a fine art degree at UE, but obviously as a mature student. So my work is very much based on the observational, as well as trying to understand the complexities, I suppose, between various, what I describe as interfaces. And maybe we should just proceed and have a look at my first film clip, which is really me trying to understand the ideas behind science and various writers such as Carlo Rovelli alongside the natural world and how we interact with that. This is probably my most recent piece of work. And I think we'll just go ahead and show it and maybe chat afterwards.
Okay, thanks for that, Tina. So I've already queued up your films, so hopefully we should be able to see this first sequence.
What does a given interpretation mean for my own understanding of how reality works? That is, what does it allow? What does it prohibit? And most importantly, how does it support, contradict, enhance, restrict my own experience? And then he also gave a more specific response about Rovelli's remarks. Like, how does that kind of factor into our own research that we're doing here, whether it's scientific or artistic. But I did mostly read The Order of Time. That was one of the books Jeffries suggested.
Okay, I think we're back again. Fascinating. Are you working with found footage there, footage that you've gathered electronically?
Yes, normally I use all the footage that I take myself, but on this occasion I've used found footage without copyright that I've sourced and manipulated it at different speeds, different intensities of colour, and obviously played around with the format. And I'm very interested in the juxtaposition between sort of image and sound as well. That particular clip is at the start of that film. The whole piece is about 5 minutes long and goes on to have footage that I took of the murmurations alongside clips based around the ideas of nostalgia. And it seems to, with hindsight, have some relevance to trying to understand the pandemic, although I didn't realise it when I was working on it. This sort of play between science, nature, not understanding nature, the manipulation of nostalgia, and how we rely on on nostalgia as a very calming effect without being melancholic. So yeah, there's a few elements in there.
So you mentioned when you introduced it, you used the word interfaces. So that means something to me, but probably you're articulating something slightly different. When I think of an interface, because I spend so many hours on a computer, I'm thinking about, the software that I'm working. You're presumably talking about where you talked about science and nature, where it meets in the middle. So are you describing your film as an interface? Is that what you're...
Not in a strictly filmic sense. I think when I'm using the term interface, I'm talking about the relationship between ideas and image and this somehow incomprehension. I think I've come to the stage of my life where I actually realise I don't understand science. There's lots of things I don't understand. There's lots of things I think I understand. There's lots of things I hope I understand. But it's always a constantly changing sort of flux. And therefore, so when I talk about interfaces, it is that slippage, that relationship between maybe different times and places, or nature or rural and the urban. There's some connection, but I find it almost intangible. And I think that's where my artistic response comes from.
Okay, so you are based in Somerset, and Ignite Somerset is about working with artists working in Somerset. Tell me, what are some of the challenges that you faced? I think where you're located, when we first met, you said you identify both with Bristol and also with the county of Somerset. So tell me, what are the challenges that you face working with digital media and just as an artist in general?
Well, Somerset's such a big county. It really does depend where you live, I think. And yes, I am sort of equidistant between Bristol and Taunton. So I have connections through being a student at UE in Bristol, but I also I'm very deeply rooted in Somerset. I'm from Somerset. I've lived in Somerset for most of my life, not all of my life. And I think it's the again, Somerset's a fascinating county. It's got so much history involved. There's also always been a history of non-conformism, going back to sort of like the Monmouth Rebellion and the all the chapels, and the rural background, but also the urban areas as well. So I think that there is a difficulty in Somerset in sometimes making yourself not work in isolation. It's this idea of trying to build your own network, which is where I think obviously Somerset Film is brilliant at that, and things like having the creative network and all the workshops and everything. So I think there are particular challenges just because it's such a big county, and also thinking about where you would show your work, how you connect up with other people, and sort of try and build on some sort of digital sort of frame, artistic framework. So there's challenges, but there's plenty of good things as well.
So do you see yourself then as an individual in a long tradition of creative rebellion in Somerset?
I think that I sort of have quite an observational eye. So I think that yes, there probably is a sort of element of everybody wants to be an individual, but obviously we all have to live and work in a community and a society as well. So I think you can be both, and I think that's what Somerset does.
Thank you. So we're going to cue up the next film, which I had a quick look at earlier on as I was preparing for this chat. So we're about to see some images of diggers on the beach and some other quite abstract images. Tell us about what we're about to see.
This was sort of like more of an experiment that I carried out earlier this year. This film is sort of all footage that I took and record the sound recordings that I made in the field as well. And it's really an experiment examining a sort of disconnection between sound and image, because sound is as important a sense as the eye to making you respond. So some of the images are connected, some are not connected. It's almost like a collage effect. I think in this first clip of the film, there's the diggers on the beach, and there's also some footage that I took at Greenham Common, which is now a big sort of nature reserve type area. So there's sort of like images that I just found interesting, and some were beautiful and some were not beautiful, and some sounds were beautiful and other sounds were incredibly annoying, but they all provoke a sort of response.
Okay, let's have a look at film number 2. Okay, back to us again. It was interesting listening to you talk about the piece that we just watched, and you talked about the juxtaposition of sound and images, sound and pictures. Is it important that the viewer to your work has a context, or do you prefer actually that they experience the work with no context whatsoever?
I think I probably prefer it if they don't have a context. I think it's just a pure, visual experience. But if they want to have a context, then they can find out more. But, I mean, often, so a lot of my work comes out of research and reading and ideas. So it's sort of like I'm making the work for me, but obviously I want other people to see it. But the variety of experience that people are going to have is going to be, it's not going to be uniform. It's going to be, everyone's going to have a individual response. And also, I think showing films on the screen and through the digital medium, a lot of my films are more suited to installation or having multi-screens running at the same time, and the cacophony of sound being made as well. So I think watching it through a single screen is sometimes not the best way to experience it. But I'm pretty open to how it's shown.
So one question that I'll ask you is, do you think of yourself as a filmmaker? I'd be interested in your response to that.
I don't think of myself as a traditional filmmaker, and I don't think anybody would describe me as that. I think originally I come from a sort of punk ethos, if you like. So this idea that anybody can pick up a camera, anybody can make, a visual image, and it shouldn't be exclusionary. Nobody should be excluded from that sort of being able to do something. Now we all have cameras on our mobile phones, so everybody's a filmmaker, but there's different categories. And I think because I've come from a fine art background, where experimentation has been encouraged, and I've always been interested in that sort of approach. I think I like this term fine art documentary. Yeah, a mixture. Yeah, SLR, sort of digital camera, and mobile phone. Basically that. I just want to be able to shoot something anywhere. And also I have the advantage that if I'm filming on something like that, if I'm doing it live, nobody really is going to take much notice of me, because I'm a middle-aged woman and they don't, so I probably get access to places that others might not.
That's a really interesting point. We'll come on to that in a bit, I think. It's interesting what you're saying about, the punk ethos, and you said now everybody has a movie camera in their pocket. And it's, if you think back to Eastman Kodak, and suddenly, a camera was small enough and cheap enough to be afforded, and anybody could suddenly go out and shoot photographs. And I think there was a big question mark over whether photography was this art form or not anymore, because everybody could do it, and it didn't require specialist knowledge, equipment, a studio, that suddenly, and then a revolution in photography happened, and a kind of new way of seeing the world around us happened. So do you see yourself as sort of in that tradition at the moment? Everybody, like you say, has got a movie camera in their pocket.
Yeah, no, I think that's really true, and I think it's really interesting to see how we're going to develop in the future with that, because obviously people are having to become, well, I mean, I've got a son, and it's his generation. It's like the absolute norm to have a camera and in your phone and use it, and the way that you engage with digital media and means is just completely different. But I think you've just got to remain open to those possibilities and just keep experimenting. I think one of the things that influenced me, and probably going on to talk about, I think the next piece of film is that I really liked it in the I think it was the 80s when Derek Jarman filmed with Super 8 surreptitiously being driven around Moscow, and it was like fantastically juddery footage, but it was really furtive and really conveyed something that was you know, I just thought was absolutely amazing. So yeah.
The next film that we're going to look at, it actually features, it seems to me to feature kind of a carnival street celebration thing. Do you want to just introduce what it is that we're about to see?
Yeah, it's actually the Minehead Hobby Horse at sort of 6 o'clock in the morning. I made a film which is a longer film, which is more sort of documentary spoken word overlaid, but this was like a short film that it got accepted into. There was a UAL UWE Kino event in London, and it was accepted to be shown in there. It's only quite a short piece, but again, it's the sort of musical element to it as well. But what I've also found really interesting with engaging with the people involved was I was investigating this. There's an idea called communitas, which is about a community which exists. It's a sociological term without hierarchy. So there's a really flat structure, but it's a really appealing idea. And to me, that event was really, you know, really showed it. And it's also, there was another influence that was also at the back of my mind. There's an artist called Stuart Brisley who made a fantastic film, black and white, of, I think it's the Hexie Hood. So it's that whole idea of traditional events which somehow take on a life of their own amongst the people involved or the people who are following it. And it's just, well, obviously there's a whole area there in Somerset to be mined about these sort of traditions with the, you know, the squibbing and everything like that. But I just like that handheld camera, shaky camera effect, nice and dark. Yeah. So that's what this is.
Okay, let's have a look at this third sequence. Okay, it's interesting, you know, you talk about tradition and customs, and I'm here in Bridgewater, where obviously, you know, the home of Carnival, and these are traditions that go back many, many, many generations, and it's interesting how, with everything that goes on, despite everything that goes on, these traditions seem locked in somehow. So, with that piece, are you commenting on tradition as an integral part of society? That it's kind of it appears to be a very English thing that we've just looked at, and are you sort of are you in that film? Are you commenting on how it's kind of ingrained within us?
Sort of, but I think the main thing that I found in making that film, and actually there is a longer film, is really how they're affected by current socio-economic conditions. So a lot of these traditions are obviously altering and adapting to the current, to the current time in which they're being played out. But also, I mean, I've personally thought there was quite a lot of the way sort of like the Minehead hobby horse, in my view, has sort of altered, is that there's a lot of people with holiday homes in Minehead. They actually like them going through at 6 o'clock in the morning, banging the drums and doing this, that, and the other. And it's like, one day a year. And it's a really working class tradition as well. And it's not at all prettified or made something for like the tourists or it's it's interesting the way things have developed. And I think that's what's so good about the Bridgewater Carnival as well, is that every year it's the same families, it's the same thing, and like the squibbing is just amazing. Yeah, just so exciting, and just fantastic.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I was reflecting on something I was involved in a few years ago. It was a project focusing on border Morris dancing, and I didn't really know anything about it. But you were talking about events that are prettified or done for visitors. That's all very good. When you actually see border Morris, you wouldn't describe it as a pretty event, and it's certainly very much about being local, and sort of growing up with those traditions. So we've spent the past 6 months or so in lockdown. How has that impacted on you? I think you've recently graduated, maybe, but you describe yourself. I think you describe yourself as an emerging artist. So how is lockdown impacting on your ambition and your what you're hoping to do over the coming months?
Well, certainly impacted quite severely because I was doing my final module at university, and that normally culminates in a massive show that everybody goes to, or your friends and relatives go to, and everyone's and you just have a really nice time. Well, of course, none of that has happened, so everybody's was obviously very disappointed about that. And so what has happened instead was that there's been a digital showcase, and people just haven't seen each other, and you've been working in isolation. But on the other hand, there have been a lot of opportunities, and particularly for me, there have been opportunities because I've been working in digital media. So there are things that I've applied for and opportunities that I've been interviewed for, which have all been, really, really good, and being successful. So in a way, I was probably a little bit benefited through being a digital artist through that, because I already had things ready to go and submit. And there has been an opportunity in lockdown to network quite a lot and do training courses and meet other artists and be engaged in conversations that you probably wouldn't have normally done before, or you would have had to travel a long way to do it. So I think there's upsides and there's downsides professionally. And in a funny sort of way, I don't think it has held me back too much. But obviously, personally, like everybody, it has affected everybody tremendously. The whole sort of lockdown, the whole sort of fear of the unknown, the whole, how is life going to get back to normal? Is it going to get back to normal? And that has obviously created a sort of an artistic response, or an idea about what I want to be working on in my sort of next project, and how I'm going to fund it and things like that. So I think it's complicated, and it's just awful the way that the creative industries have been affected and not really supported. And that's why it's also really important why, you know, organisations like Somerset Film and Ignite are there to help, you know, to help people and to connect people and to keep, you know, to keep things going. I mean, there do seem to be some physical exhibitions just tentatively sort of starting up. So we'll have to see how that progresses, but it's the new normal.
Okay, thanks for that, Tina. So this next sequence, I think, starts with an oscilloscope, and tell us about what we're about to see.
Right. Well, this film was originally part of a 3-screen installation with the film starting at different times, and there's a lot of sort of sound in it, and it's almost like a hidden history of the hinterland of conspiracies in England, basically. So I visited various sites. The first one I think that's in this part of the film is Hack Green Nuclear Bunker, which was going to be the centre of regional government, I think, in the Midlands. And it's actually where Margaret Thatcher, when she sent the message to sink the Belgrano, that piece of kit, which I didn't know the name of, so thank you for telling me what it was, sent the message to actually sink the Belgrano from. So it's quite a sinister piece of equipment. It's also sort of sites of rendition in Scotland, and the first prisoner of war camp, I did some filming there in Comrie in Scotland. So they're all sort of deserted, and war sites in Orkney as well. So they're quite deserted, rural areas where these places are. But they've also have a degree of sort of menace and their own, if you like, secret histories around them. And I think with hindsight, I must have been quite influenced by Patrick Calder. I don't know if you've seen his Robinson series of films. They're quite, yeah. I think some of those ideas are probably hidden in my film somewhere. But
yes, that's interesting. The talk about secret histories here in Somerset, of course. We've got the Taunton stop line, which is military installation, and you can be happily going along the cycle path and wonder what these big concrete blocks are, but of course they are almost secret because they are covered in undergrowth and so on, and a lot of people wouldn't know what they're for, and of course they have this military context. Okay, well let's have a look at this next sequence.
Quello l'ho fatto io. Esatto. La ripresa l'ho fatta io. E qua facciamo.
L'ho già fatto, ne faccio un altro.
Okay, we're back at the engine room. So earlier on you were talking, Tina, and you described yourself as you had access to places because you described yourself as a middle-aged woman. And you've also described yourself as an emerging artist. You've also described yourself as an older emerging artist to me. tell us about that. I think when we chatted the other day, you talked about there's a sense in which you feel you're constantly needing to up your game. Just tell us a little bit more about your feelings on who you are.
Yeah, I'm not sure you ever really know who you are. You're always sort of fumbling towards trying to find it, aren't you? But yeah, I mean, I used to get really annoyed because there were age limits on being able to apply for things. It was always younger artists who have, just graduated and things like that. But and I used to sort of think, well, that's really unfair. But actually, I've come to the view that it's probably good, because I think we spoke about this the other day. You just want to cram as much into the time that you have left and experience as much as you can, and just go for it, up your game. I think we were talking about that before. And I think that you don't want to be one of those people who says, oh, the young have got all the, they've got all the opportunities and things like that, because actually, they haven't. They've got a terrible time. They've got a terrible time. So, they need as much support as older people. Everybody needs to feel that they're valued. So yeah.
So what we've got another film to look at, but what is next for you? What's just around the corner creatively?
Well, I've got a film in that was accepted into the Wales Art Contemporary, so that's sort of going on. So I was really pleased about that. And then I've just applied for some Arts Council funding, but I mean, I'm hoping that I'll get that for a small. I want to run a small community project about the community's experience of COVID in lockdown, but link it to past histories within the area and responses. So it'll be a sort of fine art documentary, maybe run alongside some sort of creative workshops. So I don't know if I'll get the funding for that or not. It's not a massive project, but I think it's important, because I think that certainly in the short term, if we're going to have any live art, we're going to have to sort it out ourselves, within the communities, and get people involved, because seeing things on the screen is all very well, but I don't think you expand your audience that way. I think it's people who like looking at things on screens, or are quite comfortable about it, or know the language that artists are using. I think if you want to create a more interesting dialogue, you have to involve people on the ground and try and get something out there physically in a COVID safe way, and stop isolation, I suppose.
Okay, so we're going to have a look at the last sequence, which, just as a warning to everybody, features bagpipes. And tell us a little bit about what we're about to see.
Right. Well, in 2016, I went to the Glastonbury Festival and saw PJ Harvey reading John Donne's poem "No Man Is an Island" the day after the Brexit vote, and it was really powerful, really, really powerful. So this is my film about "No Man Is an Island." So I think it's the last bit of it. So it's I'll leave it there. It has got bagpipes.
Okay, let's just cue that film up. Okay, we're back in the engine room. So that was the last film sequence. I've got a couple more questions I just wanted to ask you. You talked earlier about how you imagine your work being seen multi-screen, and you talked about a cacophony of sound. And actually, we've looked at some of your work this evening on a screen via social media. So it's not the ideal way of encountering the work, I suppose. So perhaps your work, and you talked about your work being seen in an installation context in a gallery. Are you optimistic for the future? What I'm thinking about here is societies that wants to engage with arts and culture, that wants to go to gallery doors have been closed for many months now. Are you hopeful that that our communities are absolutely, chomping at the bit to get through those gallery doors, or are you, not so sure that they will? What are your thoughts on that?
I think the people who normally go to galleries will want to get back. I think people who sometimes go don't want to go back until they can be, secure in the knowledge that it's a safe environment. I think that any sort of mass, gathering of people is obviously problematic at the moment. But there are things that can be done in small groups and small sort of visits, but obviously it all has to be pre-booked. So that can be off-putting to people. I think people do want to have some sort of cultural engagement. They don't want to sit watching Netflix every night, seeing the same American import, to their screen. But it may be a little bit longer before that can go ahead. So I'm sort of optimistic that it will go ahead, but not optimistic that it's going to be in the immediate, this side of Christmas. Who knows? Nobody knows, do they?
So you're hopeful that there is actually an appetite out there for people to get together to experience in arts and culture, but actually to experience something different as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think people are bored. I think they're bored, and it's sort of. I think it is. That's an ideal time to try and start a conversation, isn't it? It's all about starting a conversation, and you might not like the way it goes or what the answer is, but at least you're having the conversation.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything that we've not covered that you wanted to share?
Yeah. There's just two things. One, that I think the quality of the footage that I was certainly getting on my computer wasn't very good, but in a way I quite liked that. So maybe that doesn't matter, but there is better quality out there if you want to see it. And the other thing is that I wrote down this quote that somebody told me the other day, so I've nicked it from somewhere else, and I just thought it was a really nice quote. It's by an artist, Susan Hiller. So she said, artists have a function. We're part of a conversation. It's our job to represent and mirror back the values of the culture in a way that people haven't seen before. And I just thought that was a really nice quote. And wish I'd said it.
You just did. It's quite a good.
Not from my own brain, though.
It's quite a good quote to end on. And let's hope that the footage didn't looked okay. But actually, like you said, you quite like that. It's maybe this live streaming's a sort of live art piece in of itself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Tina. Do you want to mention any links online or anything where people can see your film?
Well, I've got a Vimeo channel. If you just search Tina Salvidge, then they're all on there. So yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you so much for taking part in the Creative Network. We are going to meet again next month. It should be on Wednesday, the 28th of October. And we're hoping to speak to another Somerset-based artist who probably does describe themselves as a filmmaker as well, Terry Flaxton. So we've got that to look forward to next month. And if you want to know more information on what Somerset Film is up to, then visit somersetfilm.com and go to the diary page. There's all sorts of events and courses, a lot of online stuff as well to engage with. So do take a look at that and find out what Somerset Film is up to. Thank you so much. We'll probably end it there, and I'll no doubt see you again soon, Tina, because I think we'll be collaborating over the coming weeks, hopefully.
Yeah, great.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Bye.